In this module, I shall be discussing with you and providing you an introduction to qualitative research methods for studying social phenomena. Most scholars, practitioners, academics, and advanced students of different disciplines like sociology, anthropology, commerce, management, economics, they all agree that the Western concepts and theories are not able to capture the complexity and uniqueness of Indian values, ethos, and culture. Our educational institutions impart knowledge mostly, if not fully, based on models and theories developed in the Western countries. Consequently, our professionals, analysts, and academics work in a state of paradox. They are given a knowledge developed in the Western culture, but have to work and operate in an environment of different values. But we all realize that there is a need to build a body of knowledge in the disciplines, in all disciplines like sociology, anthropology, management, commerce, economics, and all others, a knowledge which is rooted in and caters to needs of our country. Qualitative research methods have the right potential and rigor to create new concepts and theories. This is because qualitative methods like grounded theory assume that there is no theory. It allows the researcher to proceed without any preconceived notions or previously existing theories. In these methods, everything is data. All behavior, actions, words, sentences, expressions, gestures, artifacts, things, settings, context, etc. all are data. Qualitative methods focus on eliciting and examining lived experiences, which studying human behavior is all about. And these data are interpreted based on the comments, responses, and interpretations of the respondents. Another feature of qualitative research is that they permit the subjective interpretation of behavioral data. It allows interpretation of the world of others through the eyes and experience of the researcher in the world of others. Now notice the words. It is the study of world of others, but through the personal experience of the researcher in the world of others. This is nothing but subjective and subjective interpretation. At this point, a question can be asked. If a method permits subjective interpretation, then can that method create scientifically acceptable knowledge? Technically speaking, this is an epistemological question. Epistemology is the science of knowing, and methodology is science of finding out. Before we can establish the case for qualitative research, we have to establish, therefore, that qualitative research fulfills the epistemological considerations. To understand this, let me get back to the meaning of research. Research is an effort to gain deep insight in any issue, concept, or process. It is the systematic study of any subject to discover new information or new understanding about it. The purpose of research is to advance the frontiers of knowledge by creating new knowledge, and this can be done by discovering something new or by testing the validity of what is known already, or by falsifying the existing knowledge. Now, we human beings have the gift of creativity, so all of us are endowed with faculty of creating knowledge. But the issue is, which knowledge can be considered as acceptable knowledge and which cannot. Human beings are endowed with creativity and ability to judge, evaluate, test, discern patterns and generalize, that is, make generalizations. Each one of us is creating knowledge practically every moment. For example, suppose you visited Japan. There you lost your bag, but someone took great trouble in tracing you and returning that bag to you. You make a generalization. based on this experience, that all Japanese are honest people. This is now your theory. In this way, we humans keep rolling out theories on day-to-day basis. The question is, should all such theories and generalizations be accepted as knowledge? Philosophers have developed a branch of knowledge called epistemology, which essentially deals with the origin, nature, and limits of human knowledge. It also deals with the ways of knowing and researchers' belief system about the nature of knowledge. In the most simplistic form, epistemology is concerned with deciding what is acceptable knowledge, a knowledge which is acceptable to the scholars, thinkers, scientists, academics, and the intellectual class of the society. Broadly, there are two ways in which acceptable knowledge can be created. Or let's say there are two schools of thought with regard to creating or generating acceptable knowledge. One is what has come to be known as positivist school of thought, and the second is what we are going to discuss today in this module, qualitative research. Let's first take a look at positivism. The term positivism was coined by Auguste Comte. Comte identified society as a phenomenon that can be studied scientifically. He propagated the postulate that society could be observed and then explained logically and rationally, and that the study of society and organizations and their practices could be as scientific as biology or physics. A major strand of positivist school of thought is that the social world can and should be studied according to the same principles, procedures, and ethos as the natural sciences. The school of thought says that only that knowledge is acceptable which is experienced by the senses and is external to mind. By external to mind does not mean beyond mind. External to mind means beyond being objective. There are two things. Philosophers express this in a very interesting way. They say by external to mind means that we express a thought about the structure and working of things in such a manner that our expression about the thing being studied is independent of thought. It looks very esoteric and perplexing to say a thought about something which is independent of thought is thought about something which is independent of thought. In simple words, what it implies is that whatever is expressed about the structure and working of any phenomenon must be uninfluenced by any belief, prejudice, or bias. That is, it should be free of subjectivity. The second aspect of external to mind means that there must be separation between the observer and the observed. The two must be different. Only then objectivity can be maintained or achieved. In addition to these two dimensions, that only that knowledge is acceptable which is experienced by five senses and which is external to mind. There are a few more requirements for any knowledge to become acceptable knowledge, according to positivism. These are: number one, only that knowledge is acceptable which is measurable. Number two, which is observable. Number three, which is repeatable. And finally, number four, which is verifiable. In the context of research in social sciences, the idea is that at fundamental level, these disciplines should emulate the positivist method of the natural science, because humans could be treated as complex machines. The manner in which we study the atoms, particles, and machines, we should study human beings and societies also in the same way, employing the same methods. The term social science emerges out of this only. What is as fluid as social can be treated as science only when social adopts methods of science. Most of the research in different disciplines is, or different disciplines of social science is being carried out employing methodology which fits into the just stated epistemological orientation that only that knowledge is acceptable which is measurable, observable, repeatable and verifiable, etc. That is why look at the way most of you have been writing your research articles. There is introduction, review of literature, research gap, objectives, statement of hypothesis, quantitative data collection and statistical processing of data. Lastly, we have discussion and conclusion in which generalization is made. In other words, we make a theory and present it to other scholars and researchers for further testing and eventual application for the benefit of society. Now, this is only one way of advancing the knowledge. There is another school of thought for creating acceptable knowledge. For all practical purposes, it can be considered diametrically opposite to positivism. It is known as qualitative research approach. It rests on the premise that natural reality, that is the reality of an atom or particle or molecule, is not the same as social reality or the reality of a person or group or community or organization. This means that different methods of research are needed to study social reality. Qualitative approach to social science research rejects the positivist idea completely. It rejects the positivist idea that the same research methods can be used to study human behavior which are employed in natural sciences like chemistry and physics. Qualitative researchers' argument can be understood with the help of an analogy. For example, suppose a chemical scientist is studying the behavior of metal. He finds that the primary cause of change in the metal lies in the environment, say heat and stress. Now, these environmental forces bring about change in the metal. Now, let us look at humans. Humans also behave the way they behave partly because of their environment. They are also influenced by their environment. However, humans are influenced by their subjective perception of the environment also. That is, their own subjective realities. As far as metal is concerned, we do not worry about the subjective impressions of the metal because it does not think. But if we are fully to understand the behavior of an individual, we must understand his perception and perspective of the environment in which he or she is operating. Just looking at environment will not be enough. For example, say we are studying the behavior of a delinquent employee. Then we must understand his view of world around him also. What is his thinking about it? At the same time, we must also understand what others think of him. What are their subjective perceptions about him? And we must take into account the social and cultural context in which this delinquent employee is behaving the way he is behaving. Thus, for qualitative researcher, what the world means to the person or group being studied is critically important for achieving ends of good research in the social sciences. Qualitative researchers favor qualitative methods such as case studies, interviews and observation because those methods are better ways of getting at how humans interpret the world around them. The basic focus is that social science research aims at capturing the lived experiences of humans, be it commerce, management, economics, sociology, anthropology, or any of their offshoots, psychology, or any other branch of social science. These all focus on studying the lived experience of individuals and groups and communities. but the lived experiences and interpretations thereof are diverse, different and contextual, and therefore subjective. Qualitative researchers recognize this dimension of multiple interpretations of same event or occurrence, whereas positivists take the view that scientists' conceptualization of reality actually directly reflects that reality. Qualitative researchers argue that the positivist scientists' conceptualization is simply one of the many ways of knowing that particular reality. Thus, if multiple interpretations of reality are recognized, subjective and contextual description should fall in the category of acceptable knowledge. Earlier in this discussion, I said that positivism accepts only that knowledge as acceptable which is observable. This actually implies that there exists an external reality, a reality which is external to the researcher, and it can be described perfectly or say nearly perfectly. But proponents of qualitative research claim that this emphasis on observed and the observable fails to recognize the enduring structures and generative mechanisms underlying and producing the observable phenomena and events. These generative mechanisms, although not observable, can be included in the theoretical explanation of the phenomena. Thus, unlike positivists, qualitative researchers are perfectly content to admit into their explanations that are not directly amenable to observation. As a result, hypothetical entities called generative mechanisms that account for or cause regularities in the natural or social orders are perfectly admissible. Qualitative research is conducted through intense or prolonged contact with participants in the naturalistic setting to investigate the everyday or exceptional lives of individuals, groups, societies and organizations. The researcher's role is to gain a holistic, systemic, all-encompassing and integrated overview of the context under study, its social arrangement, its ways of working and its explicit and implicit rules. Relatively little standardized instrumentation is used. The researcher himself or herself is essentially the main instrument in the study. The researcher attempts to capture data on the perceptions of the participants from the inside through a process of deep attentiveness or emphatic understanding and of suspending or bracketing preconceptions about the topics under the discussion. Most of the analysis is done with words. The words can be assembled, subclustered or broken into segments. They can be reorganized to permit the researcher to compare, contrast, analyze and construct patterns out of them. Reading through these empirical materials, the researcher may construct certain themes and patterns that can be viewed or reviewed with the participants. The main task is to describe the ways people in particular settings come to understand, account for, take action and otherwise manage their day-to-day situations. Many interpretations of this material are possible, but some are more compelling for theoretical reasons or on grounds of credibility and trustworthiness. Now let us take a look at the main preoccupations of qualitative researchers. First and foremost is seeing through the eyes of the people being studied. An underlying premise of qualitative researchers is that the subject matter of the social sciences, that is, people and their social world does differ from the subject matter of the natural sciences. A key difference is that the objects of analysis of the natural sciences, namely atoms, molecules, gases, chemicals, metals, and so on, cannot attribute or assign meaning to events and to their environment. However, people do attribute meaning to events and to their environment. As a result, qualitative researchers express a commitment to viewing events and the social world through the eyes of the people that they study. The social world must be interpreted from the perspective of the people being studied rather than as though these subjects were incapable of their own reflections, thinking, and perceptions on the social world. The second point is a different type of reasoning. It is neither inductive reasoning nor deductive reasoning. It is called abductive reasoning. This kind of reasoning emanates from the fact that in qualitative research, the perspectives of those who are being studied is the basic focus of research. With abduction, the researcher grounds a theoretical understanding of the contexts and the people he or she is studying in the language, meanings, and perspectives that form their worldview. The crucial step in abduction is that, having described and understood the world from his or her participants' perspectives, the researcher must come to a social scientific account of the social world as seen from those perspectives, that is the perspective of the participants. Further, arriving at a social scientific account must not lose touch with the world as it is seen by those whose voices provided the data. On the face of it, it looks like an inductive logic, and indeed there is an element of induction in it. However, what distinguishes the abduction is that the theoretical account is grounded in the worldview of those one is researching. Abduction is broadly inductive in approach, but is worth distinguishing by virtue of its reliance on explanation and understanding on participants' worldviews. Another focus of qualitative research is on description of the phenomenon and the context in which the phenomenon is occurring. That is to say, qualitative researchers are much more inclined than quantitative researchers to provide a great deal of descriptive detail when reporting the fruits of their research. This is not to say that they are exclusively concerned with description. They are very much concerned with explanation and analysis. General impression is that qualitative researchers do not often ask the question why, but this is not so. No doubt, qualitative studies provide a detailed account of what goes on in the setting being investigated. Very often, qualitative studies seem to be full of apparently trivial details. For example, one researcher is studying marketing practices of vendors in Mumbai's local trains, described the crowd, their conversation, their dress, hairdos of women, types of purses they carried, and even their standing posture, etc. All this may sound trivial, but these details are frequently important for the qualitative researcher because of their significance for their subjects, and also because the details provide an account of the context within which people's behavior takes place. It was with this point in mind that it is strongly recommended that there is thick description of social settings, events, and often individuals. As a result of this emphasis on description, qualitative studies are often full of detailed information about the social worlds being examined. On the surface, some of this detail may appear irrelevant, and indeed there is a risk of the researcher becoming too embroiled and involved in the descriptive detail. It is here, however, that qualitative researcher has to exercise caution and restraint lest the descriptive detail inhibits and overwhelms the analysis of data. Let this be underlined here that qualitative researchers are keen to provide considerable descriptive detail because they typically emphasize the importance of the contextual understanding of social behavior. This means that behavior, values, or whatever must be understood in the particular context, that must be captured and described. This basically means that we cannot understand the behavior of members of a social group other than in terms of the specific environment in which they operate. In this way, a certain behavior that may appear odd or irrational, but it can make perfect sense when we understand the particular context within which that behavior takes place. Third aspect on which qualitative researchers emphasize is the process of occurrence of social phenomena. They are interested in understanding the processes that lead up to an event and what follows the events. For example, if you want to study the conflict resolution methods adopted by, say, servant leaders in business organizations, then as qualitative researcher, you shall be interested in the context of conflicts or differences and the interconnect of values, beliefs and behavior of leaders as well as subordinates. Such findings can inject a sense of process by seeing social life in terms of streams of independent events and elements. For example, take the case of a study of a strike by Weddington. The researcher was a participant observer. That is, he joined workers as one of them to collect data. He was involved in attending picket lines, mass meetings and planning discussions and accompanying the strikers on flying picketing and intelligence gathering maneuvers. In addition to observation, he carried out informal interviews and linked these data to other sources such as material derived from newspaper archives, company and trade union documents, letters and richly detailed minutes of trade union management meetings. As a result, he was able to show how the contemporary beliefs, values and attitudes of the workforce and the mutual feelings of animosity and distrust between employees and management were shaped by a sequence of historical events stretching back to over 20 years. We can see in this example the development of a sense of process in three ways. First, the researcher observed the strike over its entirety and gained grasp over various developments, and through this he could understand interconnections between events in clear details. Secondly, by connecting these events with historical and other data, researcher established links between the current strike and past events and actions. Thirdly, he identified the process of unfolding of the strike by capturing and sketching the context in the form of the past as well as current beliefs and values and its links with behavior during the strike. This is how qualitative researchers focus on process while examining the phenomenon. Now, yet another preoccupation of qualitative researchers is flexibility and lack of structure in the study of the subject or phenomenon. First of all, there is a distinct and clear preference for an unstructured approach for the collection of data. The investigators do not develop highly specific research questions in advance like quantitative researchers do, and therefore They do not devise instruments or questionnaires specifically for those questions to be answered. This position is largely to do with the preference for seeing through the eyes of the people being studied. In methods like ethnography and participant observation, researchers submerge themselves in the social setting. They become part of the social groups with a fairly general research focus in mind. Gradually and slowly, they formulate a narrower focus of research on the basis of observations made about the subject or issue under study. Then they go on to formulate more specific research questions out of their collected data. Similarly, interviewing is an extremely prominent method used by qualitative researchers. They prefer less structured approaches to interviewing, such as open-ended questions. On the basis of interviews, researchers can even change direction of the study during the course of the investigation, and they can do it much more easily than the quantitative researchers. Thus, the qualitative research centers on viewing the social world from the point of view of individuals to understand why social groups, communities and individuals behave the way they behave. And they try to discern through this the underlying generative structures which, though not directly observable, but are very much at work and cause of behavior. Whatever be the preoccupations of qualitative researchers, it does not mean that there is no similarity between qualitative and quantitative approaches. First and foremost similarity is that both are based on observations. Although quantitative approach lays too much emphasis on measurement, which qualitative approach does not, but both share the two major pillars of science, namely logic and observation. A scientific understanding of the world must both make sense and correspond to what we observe. Both elements are essential to science, and both of these are present in the qualitative and quantitative approaches. Apart from this, it can be pointed out that both are concerned with data reduction, answering research questions, relating data analysis to research literature, and both seek to ensure that deliberate distortion does not occur. Both are concerned with variation, though in different ways. Both must address the question of error, and so on. There are a number of qualitative research methods such as ethnography, case study, participant observation, phenomenology, interpretative phenomenological analysis, and its other variations such as semiotics, interpretive structure modeling, etc. You can read about them in different books on the subjects. Mainly, I recommend the book Practice of Social Research by Earl Babbie and Social Research Methods by Alan Bryman, on which this lecture is largely based.